HOA president ordered me off my own lane. They froze when I said I'm not a member. What happens when an HOA president orders someone off a lane they claim as their own? And why would saying, I'm not a member, suddenly change the entire confrontation? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I am glad you are here for another unforgettable neighborhood justice story. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Thank you for watching, supporting the channel, and continuing to spend your time with us. Your support truly means a lot. Before we get started, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Let's begin the story. Only Stonehaven residents can use this access. Victoria Langford said it like the gravel under my tires had been waiting all morning for her permission. It was 7:10 on a cold Virginia morning, fog hanging low over the pasture outside Roanoke. My pickup idling beside 3 orange cones that had appeared across Hollow Creek Lane sometime before sunrise. A temporary sign stood in the ditch. Stonehaven resident access only. Behind it, an orange maintenance truck sat sideways across half the lane. Victoria stood beside the driver's door in a cream coat, one hand raised toward my windshield. I rolled the window down. Move the cone. She took 2 steps closer. Are you a Stonehaven resident? No. A small smile appeared. Then why are you on our road? I looked past her toward the shallow ditch, where a brass survey monument sat half exposed beneath wet leaves. That is going to be an interesting question once you read the deed. Her smile disappeared. My name is Nathan Cole. I was 51 years old, and I owned 16 acres at the lower edge of Stonehaven Ridge, a private subdivision that had been built years after my family started using Hollow Creek Lane. I worked as a grading, driveway, and rural access contractor. I spent my days building road base, cutting drainage, setting culverts, repairing washouts, and explaining to people that a right to cross land was not the same thing as owning the land underneath it. Victoria folded her arms. The association controls this access. Controls it how? This lane serves Stonehaven maintenance and emergency operations. That was not my question. Nathan, this is not complicated. Then show me the road title. She glanced toward the orange truck. The Homeowners Association maintains the access. Sometimes. Then we regulate it. Maintenance is not ownership. Her expression tightened. You are not a member, so Stonehaven rules do not authorize you to use a private association road. That sentence was so backwards I almost laughed, but I kept my voice flat. You are right about one thing. Which is, I am not a member. She nodded as if I had finally admitted something useful. Then turn around. I opened the door and stepped onto the gravel. Cold air smelled like wet oak leaves and limestone dust. My boots landed less than 3 feet from the brass monument. I crouched and brushed mud from its top with my glove. The stamped survey mark was still visible. Same one Luke Brennan had tied into my boundary survey 6 years earlier. Victoria watched me. What are you doing? Checking whether the ground moved overnight. Do not be sarcastic. I stood and looked back up the lane. About 900 feet of gravel ran from the county road to my farmhouse and workshop. My grandfather had graded the first version of it more than 50 years ago. My father had rebuilt the stone culvert after a flood. I had resurfaced it myself more times than I could count. Stonehaven used only the first portion because an old access agreement allowed certain traffic across it. Victoria had apparently found the word access and decided the rest of the document was optional reading. She pointed toward my pickup. If you refuse to leave, I will document this as unauthorized road use. Document everything. I intend to. Good. I took out my phone and photographed the temporary sign, the cones, the orange truck, the brass monument, and the old galvanized Hollow Creek Lane sign still standing behind Victoria's newer one. 2 names on 2 signs. 1 road. You really think a photograph changes anything? She asked. No. I slipped the phone back into my coat. Recorded documents do. She stared at me for a second, then reached for the clipboard inside her truck. I got back into my pickup but did not turn around. Victoria had heard I was not a member and treated it like proof I had fewer rights. What she did not understand was that membership would have been the only thing giving her rules any power over me at all. Hollow Creek Lane had been carrying my family home long before Stonehaven Ridge ever appeared on a county planning map. My grandfather cut the first gravel track through the lower pasture more than 50 years earlier, back when the hillside above us was mostly hardwoods, fence lines, and cattle ground. My father widened it enough for farm trucks, rebuilt the drainage after 2 bad storms, and set the stone culvert headwall that still carried runoff beneath the lane every spring. By the time the subdivision arrived, the road already had a name, a history, and enough compacted stone under it to survive things prettier neighborhood streets never had to think about. For details along that lane mattered more than Victoria's new sign. The old galvanized Hollow Creek Lane marker near the county road. The stone culvert headwall just past the first bend. The brass survey monument beside the ditch. And a small red survey nail driven into an oak farther uphill, almost exactly where the access rights granted to Stonehaven stopped. Most people would have driven past all 4 without noticing any of them. I noticed them because I had maintained that road for years. I knew where water wanted to cross. I knew which shoulder softened after heavy rain. I knew where the gravel thinned under delivery trucks and where I needed to add stone before winter. Stonehaven Ridge came later, 18 years before Victoria decided the lane had somehow become theirs. When the developer bought land behind my property, he needed limited access across the lower section of Hollow Creek Lane to reach a stormwater basin and allow certain maintenance and emergency vehicles through. My father agreed to an easement over the first 400 feet. I remembered the survey work. I remembered the stakes. I remembered the day the developer's attorney sat at our kitchen table explaining that the road would stay ours while Stonehaven received permission to cross part of it for specific purposes. Nobody called it a community road then. Nobody put up resident-only signs. Nobody told my father he needed a decal to drive to his own barn. For years, the arrangement worked because everybody understood the difference between using something and owning it. Stonehaven maintenance trucks occasionally came through. I resurfaced the lane when it needed work. Sometimes the association contributed to gravel costs on the section its vehicles used. Sometimes I handled it myself because I already had equipment on site. None of that changed the deed. The morning after Victoria blocked me, I walked the lane from the county road to my workshop with a notebook in my coat pocket. The fog had lifted, leaving wet gravel dark under the trees. I photographed the old galvanized sign first. Rust along the bottom edge. Hollow Creek Lane, still readable. Then the stone culvert headwall, rough and gray where my father had reset the upper stones decades ago. Then the brass monument. Finally, farther uphill, the red nail in the oak. The paint around it had faded, but the head still showed. I stood there for a while looking back toward the county road. From that spot, Victoria's new temporary Stonehaven sign was well downhill. Her cones were gone, but tire marks from the orange maintenance truck remained in the gravel. The lane itself had not changed. Same crown, same ditch, same culvert, same boundary markers. The only new thing was somebody's assumption about what an old easement meant. The neighborhood had been there 18 years. Hollow Creek Lane had been in my family for more than 50. Victoria had arrived with a clipboard and decided history started where her map said Stonehaven began. The road knew better. Victoria's mistakes started with a map she read too quickly. She had been president of the Stonehaven Ridge Homeowners Association for less than a year when she began standardizing everything she could put a label on. Visitor tags, contractor decals, pool passes, parking stickers, service entrances, gate codes. She liked systems that could be reduced to colors, lists, and laminated rules. If a maintenance truck used a road, she wanted a permit for it. If a delivery driver crossed into Stonehaven, she wanted a record. If a resident parked in the wrong place, she wanted a notice under the windshield wiper before breakfast. Most of that had nothing to do with me. Then she found the access map. Eric Dalton, Stonehaven's maintenance supervisor, told me about it later. The board had been reviewing old property documents for a road maintenance budget when Victoria opened a recorded plat showing part of Hollow Creek Lane marked with the words access easement. According to Eric, she pointed at the line and said, "Good. We control it." Eric had answered, "I think that means we can use it." Victoria said, "Same difference." It was not the same difference. Not even close. A week after the cones appeared, a new metal sign went up beside the old galvanized Hollow Creek Lane marker. Stonehaven Private Access. Authorized residents and contractors only. I found it on my way home from a grading job. The new sign was clean, reflective, and mounted on a pressure-treated post. The old sign beside it was faded, slightly crooked, and older than half the houses uphill. I parked, got out, and stood between the two. Same road. Two completely different claims. Victoria drove down 10 minutes later in a dark sport utility vehicle and stopped beside me. I see you noticed the new access sign. Hard to miss. We are finally bringing the lane under the same access standards as the rest of Stonehaven. You mean your easement section? The association controls the access corridor, uses part of it. She opened her door and stepped onto the gravel. Nathan, if Stonehaven maintains a road used for community operations, we have a responsibility to regulate it. Responsibility to your easement is not authority over my land. Again with the semantics. Again with the deed. She pointed toward the fresh sign. Residents need consistency. Contractors need clear rules. We cannot have people driving through without authorization. I am driving from my farmhouse to the county road. You are still using Stonehaven access. I looked at her. No, Stonehaven is using coal access. That irritated her more than I expected. The association has used this lane for 18 years, with permission recorded for specific purposes, and we contribute to maintenance. Sometimes, which means we have an interest in how the lane is managed. An interest is not ownership. Victoria crossed her arms. The board's position is that Hollow Creek Lane functions as community infrastructure. The board can call my driveway an airport if it wants. That does not put airplanes on the deed. She ignored the joke. You will need a Stonehaven vehicle decal if you intend to continue using the controlled section. I almost thought I had heard her wrong. A decal? All authorized vehicles will display one, including mine, if you use the lane. Victoria, my truck is parked at a house that can only be reached by this lane. That is exactly why you should cooperate. I looked uphill toward the red survey nail in the oak, nearly 400 feet from the county road. Beyond that point, Stonehaven's recorded access ended. Victoria's new sign had been placed below it, but the policy language she was describing did not stop there. In her mind, one easement had swallowed the entire road. Show me the document that makes my parcel part of Stonehaven, I said. You benefit from proximity to the community. That is not a document. Your property shares access infrastructure. That is not membership. Her jaw tightened. You seem determined to make this difficult. No, I am determined to make it precise. She got back into her vehicle and closed the door. Before driving away, she lowered the window. The board will be issuing formal road use rules next week. I looked at the shiny new sign beside the old Hollow Creek marker. Then make sure you read past the word access before you print them. She drove uphill without answering. Victoria had found the word easement and treated it like a deed. The problem was that she had stopped reading before the part that said limited. The first violation arrived in my mailbox 2 days later, which was almost funny considering the mail carrier reached my house by driving the same lane Victoria claimed I had no right to use. The envelope had the Stonehaven Ridge logo in the upper corner and my property address printed beneath it. Inside was a formal notice titled Unauthorized Use of Association Roadway. It said my pickup had been observed traveling through a controlled access corridor without a resident decal, and that continued violations could result in towing, access restrictions, and additional enforcement action. I stood beside the mailbox reading it while cold wind moved through the bare trees. Then I looked back down Hollow Creek Lane toward the county road. Same gravel, same ditch, same stone culvert, same brass survey monument. Different letterhead. I folded the notice and put it in my jacket. The second notice came 3 days later. This one included photographs of my truck near the new Stonehaven sign and a warning that unauthorized vehicles could be removed at the owner's expense. Victoria had signed it herself. I called her from my workshop. You are threatening to tow my truck from my own lane. I am enforcing access rules. Against someone who is not a member. Against an unauthorized user. Those are not the same thing. Nathan, we have already discussed this. No, you have repeated a conclusion. Her voice cooled. The board has authority over Hollow Creek Lane. Then identify the recorded instrument that gives you authority over me. You are benefiting from Stonehaven infrastructure. I am driving over land on my deed. The lane serves our community. And my house. She exhaled sharply. If you continue refusing to comply, we will escalate. Put that in writing too. The next escalation came the following morning. I was grading a washed-out shoulder near the lower bend when a county deputy cruiser rolled slowly through the white gravel and stopped behind my pickup. Victoria was standing near the new sign with her phone in one hand. Deputy Daniel Price stepped out, looked at me, then at her. I was told there is a dispute over roadway access. Victoria answered before I could. This is a private Stonehaven access road. He is not a member and refuses to leave. Deputy Price looked toward me. Do you live up this lane? Yes. Do you own property here? 16 acres, including the roadbed. Victoria cut in. The association controls the access easement. Deputy Price looked back at her. Who owns the road? Stonehaven controls it. I almost smiled. That was not the question. She shot me a look. Deputy Price held up one hand. Do either of you have the deed or easement documents with you right now? I had my phone photographs and survey notes, but not the full recorded set. Victoria had an association map, not title documents. Then this sounds like a civil property dispute, he said. I am not deciding road ownership on the shoulder. Victoria looked irritated. So he can just ignore our rules? I am saying you both need the recorded documents. He turned to me. Do not block any lawful access while this gets sorted out. I have not. Then he looked at Victoria. And I would be careful about towing anything until ownership and authority are clear. That sentence changed her posture. Not much. Enough. The cruiser left 10 minutes later. Victoria stayed by the sign. This is not over. Good, I said. I was planning to pull the records tomorrow. She looked toward my truck. You really think a deed is going to erase 18 years of association use? I put the grading rake back in the bed. No. I think the deed is going to explain exactly what those 18 years of use were. That evening, I laid the 2 violation letters on my kitchen table beside photographs of the brass monument, the old lane sign, the stone culvert, and the red survey nail. Victoria thought calling the deputy had raised the stakes. All it had done was give me a reason to pull every recorded page. The next morning, Rebecca Sloan spread 3 stacks of recorded documents across her conference table and told me not to touch anything until she finished reading. She was a property attorney who had handled access disputes before, and she treated land records the way I treated a drainage grade. Start at the beginning, follow every line, and never assume the last person understood what the first person built. I brought Victoria's 2 violation letters, photographs of the Stonehaven sign, the brass survey monument, the old Hollow Creek Lane marker, the stone culvert, and the red survey nail in the oak. Rebecca started with my deed. 16 acres. Same legal description I had known for years. Hollow Creek Lane shown within the coal tract. No Homeowners Association language. No covenant reference. No membership obligation. Then she opened the Stonehaven Ridge Declaration. Page after page listed residential lots, common areas, restrictions, assessments, architectural rules, and association authority. Your parcel should appear somewhere if they are claiming you are subject to this, she said. We checked the legal description. Nothing. The annexation exhibits. Nothing. Amendments recorded over 18 years. Still nothing. Then Rebecca stopped on page 17. Here. I leaned closer. The paragraph was titled Excluded Parcel. It described the coal tract by acreage, boundary calls, and reference to the older survey. My property. Explicitly excluded from the Stonehaven Declaration. I read the language twice. So I never joined. Not according to anything recorded here. No automatic membership. No later annexation. I have not found one. She turned to the signature pages. No joinder from you. No joinder from your father. No amendment bringing this parcel into the association. I looked at Victoria's first violation notice sitting beside the declaration. Unauthorized use of association roadway. The paper suddenly looked lighter. Rebecca was not finished. She opened the access easement next. The document had been recorded when Stonehaven's developer needed limited passage across the lower section of Hollow Creek Lane. Rebecca traced the easement description with a pencil. First 400 feet from the county road. That matches the red nail. Probably the survey reference point they used in the field. She kept reading. Maintenance access to the stormwater basin. Emergency passage. Certain service vehicles. Non-exclusive use. Then came the sentence that made the entire dispute collapse into plain English. Fee ownership of the underlying roadway remains with the coal parcel. I sat back. They have permission to cross. Yes. They do not own the road. Correct. They can use 400 feet for listed purposes. Correct. They cannot tell me I need a resident decal to drive home. Rebecca looked at me. Not based on anything I am seeing here. I handed her Victoria's second letter, the one threatening towing. Rebecca read it, then placed it beside the easement. This is where she has mixed up three different things: ownership, access, and membership. Exactly. She pointed to the deed. You own the lane. Then to the easement. Stonehaven has a limited right to use part of it. Then to the declaration. Your parcel is not subject to their covenants. I looked through the window at the gray Virginia sky and thought about Victoria standing beside that reflective sign telling me I needed permission to drive across gravel my family had maintained for half a century. Can I take their sign down? Rebecca shook her head. Not yet, even if it is on my land. I want the survey tied down first, and I want them to state their claimed authority in writing. That made sense. I did not need to win quickly. I needed to win cleanly. She called Luke Brennan before I left and asked him to verify the exact easement limits using the brass monument and the old recorded calls. As I gathered my papers, Rebecca tapped page 17 one more time. Nathan, this is the sentence they should have read before sending you a violation. I looked at the excluded parcel language again. Victoria had spent 2 weeks treating, not a member, like proof I had no rights on Hollow Creek Lane. The record said the opposite. Stonehaven had permission to cross part of my land. They had never acquired permission to govern me. I did not accuse Victoria of overstepping. I asked her to prove she had not. Rebecca Sloan drafted the letter that afternoon, and we kept it almost painfully simple. Identify the recorded document placing the coal parcel under Stonehaven Ridge covenants. Identify any joinder signed by me or my father. Identify any annexation amendment. Identify any deed restriction granting Stonehaven regulatory authority over Hollow Creek Lane. Identify the document supporting the association's claim that it could fine, tow, or restrict my use of the road. We sent it by certified mail and electronic mail. Rebecca looked at me before clicking send. Do not argue with whatever comes back. I was not planning to. Good. We want their position, not a debate. Victoria answered the next morning. Her response was 3 paragraphs long and confident enough to be useful. She wrote that Stonehaven membership and regulatory responsibility followed from proximity, shared infrastructure, historical maintenance, and community benefit. She said the association exercised full regulatory authority over Hollow Creek Lane because the lane functioned as an access corridor serving Stonehaven. Rebecca read the message twice. Then she looked at me. Did she attach a joinder? No. An annexation? No. Road title? No. Then she answered everything except what we asked. I pointed to the sentence about membership following from benefit and proximity. That is not how recorded land restrictions work. Rebecca nodded. Exactly. Later that morning, Luke Brennan met me at the brass survey monument beside the ditch. Cold sunlight had finally burned through the fog, and the white gravel looked almost blue under the trees. Luke set his equipment near the old Hollow Creek Lane sign, tied into the brass monument, then worked uphill using the recorded easement calls. I followed at a distance while he checked bearings and distances. Near the oak where the red survey nail sat, he stopped. Here, 400 feet, within inches of the recorded endpoint. He verified it twice, then marked the easement limit on his field tablet. That little red nail I had walked past for years suddenly became the cleanest visual line in the entire dispute. Everything below, it was part of the limited access area. Everything beyond it was still my lane with no Stonehaven access right at all unless some other document said otherwise. We kept walking. 30 yards past the red nail, another new Stonehaven sign had appeared since my last inspection. Authorized vehicles only. Luke stopped beside it and checked his tablet. This one is outside the easement. How far? Roughly 90 feet. Farther uphill, Victoria's maintenance crew had placed 2 reflective marker posts beside another stretch of road. Those were outside the easement too. I photographed each one with Luke's survey point visible where possible. No touching, no removal, just location. When Luke finished, he sent Rebecca the field confirmation before sunset. The next day, she forwarded Victoria a formal request to suspend enforcement until the board reviewed the recorded documents and survey. Victoria replied that Stonehaven's long-standing operational control was sufficient and that road use rules would remain in effect. Another sentence for the file. That afternoon, I drove home slowly and stopped beside the red nail. Below me, Stonehaven had a limited right to pass. Above me, their new sign stood on land their own easement did not even reach. I had spent 2 weeks asking Victoria to show me why I belonged to her Homeowners Association. She never produced a membership document because there was not one. I had not asked her to admit she was wrong. I had asked her to prove she was right. The board meeting lasted 43 minutes, but the argument ended in less than 5. Rebecca Sloan arrived with one slim folder. I brought nothing except the 2 violation letters Victoria had sent me. Megan Walsh, the Stonehaven Ridge treasurer, sat near the center of the conference table with the association's attorney beside her. Victoria had her binder open, 3 colored tabs sticking out from the top, and the same controlled expression she wore every time she expected procedure to carry more weight than facts. Rebecca did not start with a speech. She placed 3 documents on the table. My deed, the Stonehaven Declaration, the recorded access easement. Then she looked at the association attorney. Is Nathan Cole's 16-acre parcel subject to the Stonehaven Ridge covenants? The attorney opened the declaration to page 17, read the excluded parcel language, and answered, No, nobody moved. Victoria leaned forward. That does not address the road. Rebecca slid my deed closer. Does Stonehaven own Hollow Creek Lane? The attorney checked the legal description and shook his head. No. Fee ownership remains with the Cole parcel. Victoria's face changed. Not much. Just enough to show that the first answer had not been the one she expected, and the second was worse. Rebecca touched the 3rd document. What does Stonehaven possess? The attorney followed the easement description with one finger. A limited non-exclusive access easement over the first 400 feet for the stated maintenance, emergency, and service purposes. Rebecca sat back. So the association has a right to cross part of Nathan's road. Correct. Does that easement make Nathan a member? No. Does it give Stonehaven authority to apply its resident parking or vehicle rules to him? The attorney paused, then answered carefully. Not based on this document. I looked at Victoria. She had frozen with one hand still resting on her binder. Weeks earlier, she had asked whether I was a member and smiled when I said no. Now the same answer sat in the middle of the table like the only fact that mattered. Megan picked up my first violation letter. Unauthorized use of association roadway, she read aloud. Then she looked at the attorney. Can we issue this to someone whose parcel is outside the declaration and who owns the roadway? Not under the covenants, no. She picked up the towing warning next. What about this? Same problem. Victoria finally spoke. The association has maintained that lane for 18 years. I answered before Rebecca had to. You have contributed to maintenance on the section your easement uses. That is operational control. Rebecca slid a printout of Victoria's electronic mail across the table. Full regulatory authority over Hollow Creek Lane. Your own easement says limited access, she said. Megan opened Luke Brennan's survey confirmation. The red survey nail in the oak marked the 400-foot endpoint within inches. Then came the photographs of Victoria's newer signs beyond that point. Authorized vehicles only. Stonehaven private access. Both sitting outside the easement. Megan stared at them. Why are we regulating road beyond the area we even have a right to use? Victoria looked toward Eric Dalton, then back at the table. Those signs were part of a broader access policy. The attorney closed the easement document. A broader policy cannot expand a recorded property right. That was the sentence that finished it. No raised voices. No dramatic accusation. Just 3 pieces of paper and one legal distinction Victoria had ignored from the beginning. I owned the lane. Stonehaven had a limited right to cross part of it. My land had never joined the association. Victoria had treated those 3 facts like they were interchangeable. They were not. Megan looked at me. So when you said you were not a member, I meant exactly that. She nodded slowly. Across the table, Victoria said nothing. No membership. No covenant. No road ownership. The first thing Stonehaven Ridge did after the meeting was withdraw every violation they had issued against me. Megan Walsh sent the notice the next morning. Unauthorized roadway use, void. Vehicle decal requirement, not applicable. Towing warning, withdrawn. Any fines connected to those notices, canceled. The language was dry, almost administrative, but after weeks of being told I needed permission to drive to my own house, I read every line twice. Rebecca Sloan called before lunch. Do not remove any signs yourself. I was not planning to. Good. Let them correct what they installed. By 2 that afternoon, Eric Dalton and 2 maintenance workers were on Hollow Creek Lane with a post puller and a flatbed utility trailer. I watched from the shoulder as they started with the reflective Stonehaven sign near the county road. The metal post came loose with a dull scrape of gravel and wet soil. Then they removed the authorized vehicle's only marker farther uphill, the one Luke Brennan had documented nearly 90 feet beyond the recorded easement. The old galvanized Hollow Creek Lane sign stayed exactly where it had always been. Rusted edge, faded lettering, still standing. Eric paused beside it and looked at me. That one is yours. Always was. He nodded and kept working. The board did not stop at the signs. Megan called a second meeting to review how much money had been spent enforcing rules against a parcel that had never joined Stonehaven. Survey review, attorney consultation, maintenance labor, printing, signage, administrative time, deputy call, Victoria's road policy rollout. The number was not enormous, but it was large enough to make the room uncomfortable when Megan read it aloud. All of this started because we never verified whether Nathan was actually subject to our declaration. Victoria sat near the end of the table, no binder open this time. The road serves Stonehaven. I acted to protect community access. Rebecca placed Victoria's electronic mail into the record. The association exercises full regulatory authority over Hollow Creek Lane. Megan looked at the sentence, then at the easement. But we do not. The association attorney answered, no. We have a limited non-exclusive access right over the first 400 feet. Victoria said, that is still significant authority. It is significant access, he replied. Not the same thing. That distinction had become impossible to hide behind policy language. The board voted to remove Victoria from the Road and Access Committee immediately. Future roadside signs, towing notices, and access rules affecting property outside Stonehaven's platted lots would require deed and easement review before enforcement. A special election for association president was scheduled for the following month. I did not ask for that. I did not campaign for it. I did not need Victoria publicly humiliated. What I wanted was simpler. My lane left alone. My ownership recognized. Stonehaven's real easement respected exactly as written. That same week, the board sent a written acknowledgement confirming that my 16-acre parcel was excluded from the declaration and that Hollow Creek Lane remained part of the coal tract subject only to the recorded limited easement. They also agreed to reimburse the reasonable survey and legal expenses caused by the enforcement dispute. I signed nothing that expanded or reduced their existing access rights. That mattered. I was not trying to punish the neighborhood by taking away the maintenance and emergency route my family had granted years ago. Stonehaven trucks could still cross the lower 400 feet when the easement allowed it. They just could not turn that right to pass into a right to govern. A few days later, I drove the lane after rain. Water moved cleanly through the stone culvert. The brass survey monument showed through damp leaves. At the oak, the red survey nail still marked the easement endpoint. Beyond it, the newer Stonehaven signs were gone. Victoria had treated an easement like a crown. By the end of that week, the board had finally put it back where it belonged, on paper. By late October, Hollow Creek Lane looked almost exactly the way it had before Victoria decided it belonged to Stonehaven. That was the part one liked most. No new gate, no dramatic barrier, no victory sign, just white gravel under my tires, wet leaves collected along the ditch, and the old galvanized Hollow Creek Lane marker leaning slightly toward the county road. The lane never needed to be reclaimed because it had never stopped being mine. The special election happened on a Thursday evening at the Stonehaven clubhouse. I did not attend. Megan Walsh called me the next morning while I was loading gravel into my dump trailer. Victoria lost. By much. Enough. I shut the loader down and listened to the engine tick as it cooled. What happens now? New president. New access policy. Mandatory deed review before the association issues anything involving outside property. That sounds useful. Megan laughed. You are taking this better than most people would. I did not need her job. I needed her off my lane. That was the truth. I never wanted Stonehaven to lose the access my family had granted. The maintenance crew still needed to reach the stormwater basin. Emergency vehicles still had the recorded right to use the lower section when necessary. None of that bothered me. Rights written correctly were easy to respect. It was invented authority that caused problems. A week later, I was spreading fresh gravel near the stone culvert when Eric Dalton came down in a Stonehaven maintenance truck. He slowed near the brass survey monument and lowered his window. Morning, Nathan. Morning. Heading to the basin. You know the way. He smiled. 400 feet. Exactly. He drove on. No decal check. No clipboard. No argument. When he reached the oak with the red survey nail, he turned off toward the route covered by the easement and stayed exactly where the recorded plan allowed. I watched him go, then returned to the tractor. That small moment said more than any board vote. Stonehaven still had access. I still had ownership. Nobody had to pretend one was the other. The first hard autumn rain came 2 days later. Water ran down the hillside, crossed beneath the lane through the stone culvert my father had rebuilt, and emptied into the lower ditch without washing gravel off the crown. The next morning, I drove from the farmhouse toward the county road with the heater running low and my coffee in the cup holder. The brass monument flashed briefly in the sun through wet leaves. The old sign stood where it always had. At the oak, the red survey nail caught a small point of light. Then I passed the spot where Victoria's reflective Stonehaven sign had once stood. Only 2 small holes remained in the shoulder where the posts had been pulled. I barely noticed them. For weeks, Victoria had talked about control as if repeating the word could create it. Community road, shared access, association responsibility, regulatory authority. In the end, none of those phrases changed the deed, the declaration, or the easement by a single inch. My parcel had never joined Stonehaven Ridge. My road had never become association property. Their right to cross had always been limited, and my right to drive home had never depended on a resident sticker. When I reached the county road, I stopped for traffic, looked once in the mirror at Hollow Creek Lane disappearing between the trees, and thought about the first morning Victoria asked why a non-member was on her road. She thought saying I was not a member would push me off the road. Instead, it was the sentence that pushed her authority off my land.